Hello and welcome to Lancast. Your hosts Danny Martin and Josh Gerber are here, and I have a very special guest with us today, my good old friend John Piper, who I've known since high school. Welcome, John.
Hey, thank you.
Yeah, so we go way back. John was my front man in my high school band at 12th grade, I believe, and yeah, we took the town by storm with an opening, for giant halls. Well, not really. The fire hall. I remember we came in third in the battle of the bands. That
I
was
think
a
we
fun.
got second. I think we got second in that.
We might have gotten second. Yeah, yeah. Talent show. Yeah, we played a bunch of house parties. Good times. And yeah, I'm glad to have reconnected with you because I probably only saw you a couple times after high school. Do you want to fill us in, like what direction your life has gone since then, and where you're living now?
Sure, yeah. Oof. I've done a lot of different things. My wife makes fun of me because I have had more careers than anybody she knows. I worked for the I worked for the federal government for a little while, out of college, and the Department of Defense in particular. And
Wow.
I've worked for some law firms, and then the creative juices in me got flowing, and I talked to a guy at a party and was like, hey, he was talking about how he was doing films and television up in New York, and like, how do I get into that? Like, because I used to do drama in high school, and he hooked me up, and I went up to New York. I had a buddy that was living there, and I stayed with him for a while and worked on Law and Order Special Victims Unit for a little while. Worked on, I don't know if you guys remember a little show called Ed.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I worked on some shows as a production assistant mainly, and then worked my way up to the camera crew. And then 9/11 happened, and I felt a strong need to get closer to my immediate family, and so I went back down to Northern Virginia, where Danny and I grew up, and spent a few years there, just grounding myself. And then when things seemed to be in the all clear, I moved to Richmond, and that's where I've been ever since. And I met with my wife and had a boy, and now I'm raising him, and I'm living with my wife, and I'm a school teacher. I teach history at a middle school here in Richmond. That's
Awesome.
kind of
Thank
the
you.
basics.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And I forgot to give some more context. You have never watched our show before, which is great. I'm glad you're coming in fresh. And you, yeah, I wanted to ask you some things about Richmond, but you also have connections to central Pennsylvania, from what I understand, which because most of
Yeah,
our audience here is Pennsylvania.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
born in Hershey.
awesome. All right. Yeah, good town. We get our Hershey Park passes every season. So I wanted to ask you about Richmond. I absolutely love Richmond personally. When I went to school at Virginia Tech, a lot of my favorite people were from the Richmond area. And I always tell people, like, if someone were coming to visit this country and, they were staying maybe up north or like New York City, where I've also lived. And I actually did host some friends from Spain. But I tell people, like, if you want to go experience Southern culture, like authentic, you could get Richmond. I think Richmond to me is the northernmost city that has an authentic Southern feel. Now, I don't know if you agree with that. I mean, I'm basing that only on a few trips there, but would you agree with that? Or can you talk a little bit more about Richmond culture?
Yeah, sure. I think Richmond is evolving. We're talking now about the New South, which is sort of a hybrid of Southern culture, but like maybe, and I don't want to use the term woke, but like maybe a little more evolved than it used to be, as far as like the racial relations. At least I hope.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think, like, it is a southern city. Like Hanover tomatoes, right? That's a big deal
Yeah.
around here. when the Hanover tomatoes come out, and if you haven't had a Hanover tomato, seek it out in your life. It is one of the best tomatoes in the universe, and I've been around the world enough to know about good tomatoes. It's a good tomato.
Nice.
Um, we still have good barbecue, southern sandwiches. Like there's that culture, the food culture, which I embrace as a foodie. Um, there's also, the you got, if you go just a little bit outside of the city, there are thick accents, and but
Right.
inside the city, it's a different feel. There's not as many of the thick accents and the rural feel of Southern culture, but there's still like that. This was the capital of the South. Um,
Right.
the Civil War, we have that legacy. We have, um, but we have other things that we celebrate. Arthur Ashe as one of
Hmm.
our, um, you know, 20th century achievers, and a guy who just had a boulevard named after him, and is the only monument really remaining on our Monument Avenue, which used to be full of Confederate generals and commanding
Gonna bring
officers.
that. I was
Yeah.
gonna bring that up.
That's
Well,
yeah, no,
it,
that's a touchy subject for sure. Um,
I mean, I'm not. You don't have to tell me your opinion on that, but I'm of the opinion that yeah, tearing down those statues is kind of stupid and pointless. But
Well,
maybe
it,
so,
it removes
it was,
it removes the history.
right.
You know,
yeah,
like in present day with what JD Vance did at the Munich conference a few weeks ago, JD Vance went to Europe and basically told Europe that you guys are like losing what makes the Western society, and that's free speech and human rights. And Germany won't even doesn't really even embrace like their World War II history. Like it's almost shunned from public life. Like you can't really talk about it in Germany. And I feel like if you can't really, like when they tore down the Lee statue and some of the other Confederate soldier statues, if you don't remember history, you're gonna repeat it. If you don't talk about history, you're gonna repeat it.
yeah. As a
I just
history teacher, I completely agree with, if you don't remember history, you're going to repeat it. I don't know where the proper context for that is. I I don't know. Like I still go over and over in my head. Like I thought one of the reasons I moved to Richmond and came to Richmond in the first place, I love those statues, those monuments. They're
Mhm.
beautiful. Um, what they're celebrating, I don't know if that is something I would agree with. And then if I put my shoes in an empathetic way in my brothers that live in the city, or um, and where that comes from, like I can imagine myself as a Black American or a Black Richmonder feeling pretty oppressed by those statues. So like I'm trying to see both sides. That's where I put myself most of the time. I want to try to see both sides of an argument, and I don't know that everybody puts themselves there. I think sometimes people go, "Oh, you're taking down those beautiful statues. We, what about the history?" And then, "Oh, uh, those statues
Right.
represent something hateful to me." Like
Hmm.
I'm torn most of the time
Yeah.
in my job as a history teacher,
Sure.
to see where the line is, and I'd rather us come together and talk about it a little bit less angrily.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective. And I think those of us who grew up in Northern Virginia, we had an interesting perspective because, we grew up around lots of Civil War relics. Like we had, I mean, Lee Jackson Highway was right down the road. That's the
Oh yeah,
main road. We had the battlefields nearby in Manassas. There was Jed Stewart High School. So now here's an interesting point. elementary school was named Mosby Woods before I moved to Chantilly. That it's over in Fairfax. Now, General Mosby was a Confederate general.
Dan, I didn't know this. I went to Mosby Woods as a
What? Oh my gosh!
the
No
first
way!
grader. Yeah,
Wow!
and I actually named a dog Mosby.
Oh my goodness! Okay, you named a dog after a Civil War, after Confederate general.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
I love Mosby, and there are lots of reasons why, and I can get into that. But
Yeah. Okay. Did you
I
know
think
that
Mosby's-
school? From what I no, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm really excited about this topic. Did you know that school has been renamed to Mosaic Elementary? It's no longer Mosby Wood.
Yeah, I don't. So this is where I kind of get into this. Like, I'm a history teacher, right? So I don't know that it's necessary to rename things. Like, there's context. Can we provide the context, the proper context? Like, you can be a liberal and still provide context. You can be a conservative and still provide context for your viewpoints. Like, we don't need to eliminate things. And I don't know, like, I will say this. I think that there's still a topic to debate on the monuments in Richmond's Monument Avenue. There's still discussion, but they kind of just tore it all down. There was still discussion to be had. With regards to renaming everything, like, if you're just going to rename it stuff that's, sometime in the future going to get called into question again, like, what are we doing? We're chasing our tail, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that we should be chasing our tail. Like, why are we naming things after people anyway? Let's name them after ideals. Let's name schools after things we want our children to become, or, like, not people we want our children to become, because people are flawed.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, Stonewall Jackson, right? Robert E. Lee. Like,
Robert E. Lee was an exceptional human being.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But like everyone, also flawed. I mean, everyone's flawed. But my point, what I was going to ask is, did you feel like growing up that the Confederacy was celebrated in any way, or like these people were like celebrated, like Mosby? Let's have a Mosby Day because he was a great man. I didn't get any of that. I didn't feel like we were glorifying them just because we named the history after them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like I had a little hero worship of Mosby, but it was mostly because of the tales of what he did. It wasn't like in the context of who he did it to or why he was doing it. It was these kind of cool stories, like where he snuck into one of the rival generals' camps in Fairfax and slapped him on the ass with a saber and said, "Do you know who General Mosby is?" And the guy said, "Yeah, did you find him?" And he said, "No, he found you." And he captured the guy.
Oh, did we lose John? He just left. We just lost him, but we'll give him a few minutes to come back. You're still there, right, Josh?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right.
Dude, I'm sorry about my dog. He is just
That's
wound
okay.
up tonight. I don't understand.
Hey, I love this topic. I didn't know we were going to go in this direction.
In Missouri, people in my county, there was Confederates and Union in my hometown that fought. We were a border state. Missouri was a border state.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had Confederates and Union who went to go fight for each cause.
Right.
Pretty crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah, let's give him a few more minutes. If not, there he is. Hey.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. All of a sudden, you guys disappeared.
Yeah, that's okay. We might just keep in that. Josh was just talking about how, there's similarities with growing up in well, he didn't grow up in Pennsylvania. He grew up in Missouri, and it was kind of a mix of Confederacy and Union back in the Civil
yeah,
War.
Missouri was one of the deciding factors.
Right. Well, yeah.
You had Bleeding Kansas as well. That was a interesting part of the pre-Civil Bleeding Kansas.
Yeah. We were just talking about Pennsylvania obviously has a lot of rich Civil War history, but being on the Union side, obviously, in Gettysburg, talk about deciding battles.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we can move on to another topic, but I was just thinking, like, I would really like to talk to some of my black friends that I grew up with in Northern Virginia, because here's the thing, I don't know if they were secretly harboring like some resentment to these Civil War idols. I don't think they were, but if they were, I'd like to know, because nobody ever said anything about these things being offensive growing up, is my point. And if I were to ask like one of my friends who I grew up with who's black, like, do you find this offensive? Maybe they would tell it to me now because we've been told that it's offensive. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah, I think that.
Do you mind if I say something about that? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
So the place I work for, where we get our hazmat materials for ammonia control, they actually come from Richmond, and almost all the truck drivers are African American, and they are like the most southern. So dare I say pro-Confederate heritage people I've ever met. I mean, it's incredible. Almost all the truck drivers were African American, and all but one of them that I met over the last 5 years have been like, yeah, the Confederacy was bad on slavery, but they were great at other things, and they were all gun touting, African American men. They loved their AR-15s, they loved their Second Amendment rights. It was really eye opening, because I thought they'd have animosity, towards the Confederates. But the one guy's like, really, look at my band. He pulled a bandana out of his pocket, and it was the Confederate flag. I was like, geez, what? It was eye opening for me.
Well, I think that's an important point. Like, we can't pigeonhole people into, you're black, so you must believe this, or you're white, so you must believe this, or you're Asian American, so you must feel this way about anything. Like, we're America. We're supposed to be a melting pot. We're not supposed to be polarized like this. We're supposed to be a people, one nation under God, is what the Pledge of Allegiance says, right? So are we really doing that right now? And that's been my main concern lately, is that we're allowing ourselves to be polarized, and we're allowing ourselves to believe myths about each other that I don't think exist. You know, 3 of my best black friends growing up, I met at Mosby Woods Elementary School in Fairfax. And they taught me about AC/DC and Van Halen. And like, they broke that stereotype for me. We played D&D together. Like, what are the stereotypes? Why are we allowing ourselves to be led into some sort of belief that we're divided when we're not? As we are not. When you talk to your neighbor, you can talk to them like a friend. It doesn't matter what your political beliefs are. We are neighbors and friends. And I don't understand why on social media we can be absolute enemies and territorial and divisive. And I do understand why, but I'll get to that later. But like, what are we allowing ourselves to become on the internet that we're not allowing ourselves to become in real life? Like, can we just allow real life to intrude the internet for a little while? because we are actually people who graduated high school together and people who went to elementary school together and people who love each other and want the best for each other. We all have the same goals. We want our children to be safe. We want our schools to teach our kids to be intelligent. We want health care for our elderly and our disabled. Like, we want our veterans, for Christ's sake. Like, we want all these same things. We disagree about how to get there, but that's a conversation, not a polarization. If we allow polarization, we don't get there.
Yeah, I agree with all that, but what do we do about the 20% on each side that are committed to their cause and committed to their version of their truth and their version of how they think the world is supposed to run? But like, if you have 20% on each side that are extremists, how do you get rid of that 20% on each side to then be moderate?
Well, so it used to be a lot less than 20%. If you look historically, it used to be a lot more towards the middle. So I think recent political discourse, and I think recent algorithms designed by people who play with the internet, I think that is the division. That, like, why are we more extreme than we used to be? You tell me. Cell phones? Probably.
Yeah, social media. Sure.
Social media? Probably. Like, so how do we counter? The real question is, how do we counter that? Because we are more together as a people than we realize. And the counter is, how do we counter the technology that is able to be infiltrated by nefarious forces, infiltrated by people who have those extreme views? Those are the problems, right? So
yeah,
well, how do we cancel that? I said cancel.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I mean, I think that's what we're doing here. Like, the podcast is one of the better technologies because it's the next best thing, or Zoom or podcast, whatever you want to call this, Google Meet, where it's the next best thing to having an in-person conversation. And social media, it seems like several steps removed from that, because you can't see the person in real time, and they're typing something out where they're kind of hiding behind the keyboard uninhibited, and they might be more toxic than they actually are in person. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the keyboard hero. I can't tell you guys how many emails I've written that I regret the perceived tone,
right,
that I didn't ever intend. Right.
Yeah.
So how much of that is playing into it? Like,
exactly. It's right. It's the perception of the tone and what you write itself. Yeah, it's a good point. So I guess in some small way we're helping to solve that here with our podcast. I don't know.
Hopefully we're helping
do you guys remember? Oh, I'm sorry. I keep cutting you off, John. I apologize.
No, there's a delay. So go ahead. Go ahead.
Do you guys remember when the media was calling JD Vance a weird guy? Like, he was just weird. They kept saying over and over again, he's weird. And then he goes on the Joe Rogan Experience, and you're like, I could drink a beer with this guy. Exactly. I could hang out with this guy for like a whole night and enjoy myself. Like, he's just a normal, grew up in the working class. He was raised by his grandmother. His mother was a drug addict. Like, the media said he was weird and like a sexist, but then like on the podcast, clearly he's just like a normal average guy.
Well, do you remember what Dave Smith said about that whole phenomenon? Because he had worked on Fox News and was familiar with the whole TV network world. Everybody in the morning gets their talking points like on the different networks, and they all repeat the same thing. That's why I think network news is a joke. I mean, whether it's Fox or ABC or MSNBC, it's all just garbage, honestly.
Yeah.
I think you're right, Dan. Like, yeah, you get a talking point. We're going to say, and a lot of times it's up front. It's like, oh, hey, this news media said this about this guy, or they reported that I don't know. I think I remember that Waltz maybe called him a weird guy at one point.
Yes. Yeah.
And then they just wrote with like, oh, he's just weird. Like, it's fine. He's just weird.
Yeah.
You know, I I don't care if he's weird. Like,
Right.
does he make sense to a certain amount of people? Like, and then I want to figure out why. Why does he make sense to those people? Like, what do you want to understand about those people? Aren't they your neighbors? Aren't they people you care about? Like, we're
Yep.
all in the same situation, right? We're all either going to suffer or benefit from the policies of our administrations and the people that we elect to power. So, like, we can either do that together or we can do that separately. Um, you know, I I don't know which is better. Like, at a certain point, maybe if your convictions are strong enough, you draw the line and you say, I think it's better for me if I just hold to my convictions and say screw that person. But
Mhm.
for me, as an American, as a citizen of the United States of America, I'm trying to figure out how we come back together.
That,
Eh,
yeah. That might be a good segue. I wanted to share you had a really awesome Facebook post the other week, and looks like it got a lot of action. And so you were good with me sharing that. I'm going to bring that up
Yes.
right now because we should talk about that. And yeah, the whole country should answer these questions. So maybe this is naive, but here's the thing. Oh yeah, we do have audio only listeners on Spotify, so I'm going to read it. Maybe this is
Sure.
naive, but here's the thing. As a history teacher, I have real concerns about the direction of our country. I would love to know what the people of our country truly think our priorities are. If you are willing in the comments, please list one, your primary concern about our current political climate, and two, your consistent or ongoing concern, and then let's try to have a civilized conversation and what to do about it. That's exactly what we're talking about here. It's I thought that was a great post, and it did solicit a lot of great conversation. I think from both sides of the aisle. I don't know if you want to talk about that some
Sure.
more.
First, I'll say to Josh, I teach middle school, so you don't ever have to apologize for cutting me off. I've been cut off more times in my lifetime than any other human being should be.
Hey, I wanted to be a history teacher when I was in middle school. That was actually like my passion. That's what I wanted to do.
Oh, that's
All right,
awesome.
come join the fold. It's never too late.
Yeah.
No, it's too late. I have 4 kids and we homeschool. So
Okay,
I guess in a way, I'm
you get
a
you
history
get to be a
teacher.
little bit of a
Yeah,
history teacher.
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
awesome.
It's an
Yeah,
important
so
job.
uh, yeah, and I'll just come at it from this. Like, I spend a little bit of time online each day, and I have seen people. Just today, I saw a guy post something about his political viewpoint on. I can't remember exactly what one of the things that happened in the last week, right?
Mhm.
And there have been a lot of things happening in the last
Sure.
few months and years and stuff. But so he posted it, and then somebody came on, I guess a friend of his, asked for clarification. He gave his clarification, and the guy said, well, I'm sorry, we can't be friends anymore. To me, that's unacceptable.
Wow.
Continue
Yeah.
the conversation. Tell him why it's unacceptable to you, and then ask for another piece of the conversation. Like, why are we ending conversations? Why does that have to happen?
Right.
I understand frustration.
Mhm.
I I've probably said that to my wife a couple of times over the course of our marriage. I just need you to not engage. But
Sure.
like, we haven't divorced yet, and I have family members who don't see eye to eye with me politically, don't
Mhm.
see eye to eye with me religiously. I'm not going to abandon these people,
Right.
and I am not even actively engaging in trying to change their mind.
Mhm.
I'm trying to accept them for who they are and
Right.
understand why they are who they are, and live my own life with my own convictions and understanding who I am and why I am who I am. And I think we need a lot more of that.
Totally agree. Yeah, and I mean, I've been in situations where I've told people, look, hey, I don't really want to talk about politics with you anymore. But I didn't say to them, I don't want to be friends with you anymore. Like, let's talk about something else, you know?
Yep, but that hammer's getting dropped a lot more, Dan. That hammer is getting dropped a lot more, and like we're getting more and more polarized. And it
Well, is that because the two extreme sides are getting increasingly more extreme?
yeah, I think
because
that,
because I mean, the extreme thing 10 years ago was gay marriage. You know, like Obama's first term was like, oh no, marriage is between a man and a woman, and then his second term is like, gay people should be able to get married. You know, like that was the extreme of his party, right?
yeah.
I mean, we don't need to go into it, but you know where I'm going. The extreme of that same party now is
I do.
infiltrating schools. It's infiltrating, the privacy of people's own homes. And then on the right side, you have the extremes of, trying to, control how people think. Who can be an American, who can't be an American. So like, I understand it, but like, what, like, I think I asked earlier, what are we supposed to do about the extreme 20%? We're still going to have to find a way to beat the extreme 20% to even have a hope to cool down the rhetoric.
Yeah, and that, I think, therein lies our challenge, right? As a society, therein lies our challenge. So I would encourage us, as me as a guest podcaster and you guys as podcasters, but us with some whatever small amount of influence, to encourage people to come to the center and have a discussion. Like, sure, you're extremist. I understand that. I could easily fall into my algorithm and my filter bubble and go extremist, based on what Facebook wants me to think, based on whatever I searched that week or whatever articles I read that week. Same on, my dad's side, that might be the polar opposite of what I think. And then my dad and I, what are we just going to not be son and father anymore because we have been divided by some stupid ass algorithm that pulled us apart? No, I'm sorry. That's my family. That's my brother. That's my sister. That's my friend. Like, can I just ask you to have a conversation with me and tell me why you feel this way, and help me understand you, and I'll help you understand me, and maybe we can decide that some of this shit is bullshit. Am I allowed to say that on this podcast?
Oh, absolutely.
Some of this
We
shit is
welcome it.
bullshit, guys. A lot of it is bullshit. In fact,
Yes.
we're being fed a lot of bullshit on both sides. It doesn't matter who you
Yeah.
are or which side you lean. There is bullshit being spoon fed to you that is asking you to be more extremist. And I don't know why. I don't know if there's some nefarious master plan plot from some nefarious character out there. All I do know is that it's dividing our culture, and that's unacceptable. America was built on compromise. America was built on coming together and figuring things out, and we are walking away from the table. And I don't think that's acceptable.
I agree. America was built on compromise, but part of the reason why I think we're in this mess is that because the can I say Democrats? The Democrats had.
You can talk about your political leanings. I'm just not going to talk about mine.
Yeah.
To me, in my history lesson, the Democrats controlled the House of Representatives for what, 50 years, and it took Newt Gingrich, for goodness sake, in the 90s to even win the House for the first time in 45, 50 years. So it seems like the conservatives, from, well, I guess now it's 80 years ago, all the conservatives did was compromise, and the country got further and further progressive. And perhaps it got to a point where conservatives are like, okay, we can't compromise anymore. You know, like we have to do something. You know, we're gonna have to put our foot down now, and I feel like that's some of the issues that we're having. Is that I think conservatives can't really be called conservatives because we haven't conserved anything in about 70 to 80 years. We've done nothing but capitulate and compromise, and we've let the other side, you know, change our culture. Like you're talking about our cultures being ripped to shreds. I don't even know what the American culture is.
So I have a lot of thoughts swirling through my head. One of them, have you ever heard there's a saying like, Republicans think Democrats are good people with bad ideas. Democrats think Republicans are just bad people, or something to that effect. It's a simplistic take, but it kind of, I think there's some truth to it because there's a lot of vote shaming that's going around right now. And we talked about this a couple episodes, Josh, like how you said, it's kind of obtuse to think, well, just because, you know, you voted for Trump doesn't mean you agree with everything he's doing and that you're responsible for everything, you know. And it's really a shame. I like to say on the show, like, I don't care who you vote for or whether you vote at all. Like, I don't think anyone should ever be vote shamed. It's ridiculous. And I think that's a lot of the problem. And, you know, you said Democrats and might sound like you're blaming one side, but I think there's some validity to that if that's the side that's doing the vote shaming.
No, I agree. I think that vote shaming thing is real. Like and I agree with you, Josh, as well, that the Republicans did have to sit aside and watch progressivism happen for a long time. And probably that frustration builds, right?
Just a little.
And I think and now it's like, you know, every 4 years we're changing, or every 8 years we're switching, and that it's just like these ebbs and flows of like, how much can you take and from one side to the other. And you know, as somebody who, I tend to lean center, or I want to pull people through the center, like to agree with stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And want to see us as a nation find some common ground. When I say compromise, and the nation was built on compromise, obviously compromise was probably the thing that led to the Civil War, right? we compromised so
Probably.
much that, you know, it seems like a good thing most of the time, but ultimately you can get frustrated with it when you feel like you got the less of the deal. And I don't know, like, I say it's a nation built on compromise. I can also see where compromise ends up frustrating us further. What I do know is that at the end of the day, nobody wanted to go into the Civil War when it happened, right? Like, they did, but I don't think the nation really wanted to go. Like, I don't think Franklin County wanted to go to war with the people in Clark County just to the south, that they had cousins and brothers and sisters in Winchester and up in Pennsylvania. Like, it's a tough situation. I don't think we're headed towards civil war. Don't get me wrong.
There's a lot of people who say that.
No, I know. But that's the thing, is like, we're so amplified and we're so dramatic about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, and also, I didn't mean to cut you off if you were still. Well, I mean, a lot of people blame Trump as being, you know, the Hitler or the Antichrist or whatever, and you know, I don't. You could say that he's a polarizing guy, but there's going to be another person who's held up in the same regard as Trump. Like, I remember when Ron DeSantis was running for president, and people were writing stuff like, well, if you hated Trump, you're really going to hate DeSantis. And people were prepared to hate on him just as much. And we have local politicians here who people, I think, hate just as much as they hate Trump. Josh and I know.
Oh, yeah.
And my point is, yeah, I mean, it's really bad. can I share my post from Facebook? Because I think this might be a good segue. And we don't have to get too much into Ukraine, but I think it's actually it's symbolic of it's a good metaphor for everything else that's wrong with with the country. Um, so I don't know if you saw my Facebook post, John. It was expressing my frustration with modern liberalism. I'm going to read the whole thing.
Oh, actually, I did read this one.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just going to read it real quick. I just wanted to give a shout out of appreciation to some of my anti-war friends in this platform who I would consider classically liberal, or whatever I would have expected liberalism to represent 20 years ago. I marched with some of you during the early 2000s against the faulty premised invasion of Iraq, and remained steadfastly against U.S. involvement in overseas wars, even while some of us fell asleep at the wheel during the Obama years. Example, I have to admit I didn't learn about things like the destruction of Libya, the Maidan coup, or Operation Timber Sycamore until after the fact. But what I appreciate most during these Trump years is your consistency that distinguishes you from modern day liberalism, in quotes, an ideology that seems to place anti-Trump reflex reactiveness as paramount, even if it means taking a position that necessitates people continue dying. I wish more of my friends would pay attention to your posts and re-examine their own sources and confirmation biases. And then I went on to list like a couple dozen people who I've followed over the years who I really, really admire and support. And I consider all of them left-leaning or liberal, but in the true sense of what it used to mean. And you know, I was talking about obviously what happened with the Ukraine negotiations in the last week. And I just don't understand all the people who are virtue signaling with sharing the Ukraine flag. Like, do you realize you're supporting like that we continue funding a war indefinitely that they can't win, and therefore more people will die just so that you can own Trump? Like, is that? I think that's where the logic is, and most people haven't researched the whole history of this war and like the U.S.'s role in it in 2014 that I just mentioned. And yeah, I'm gonna get all worked up if I keep talking about this because I don't want it to be just about people have strong feelings about Ukraine. But my point in this is like I miss the old liberalism. I miss Dr. King, and when we were talking about race relations earlier or stuff related to that with the statues, Dr. King was what it should be. Like the content of character is what matters, not the modern anti-racism stuff where you have to redistribute, make up for past iniquities, and I don't want to get into it, but you know what I mean. The modern definition of anti-racism involves a whole lot more than judging content of character. So anyway, I just went off on a real rant, and it was about modern liberalism is a real problem, especially if it makes you into a warmonger. That's my point.
Well, I think to Josh's point, I think extremism on either side is a real problem, right? Like, so if you're so anti-Trump that you're just reacting to everything he does without questioning why, or is there a purpose to, then you're not really being a critical thinker, right? If you're a conservative that just goes with everything Trump does without questioning it, you're probably part of the problem too.
Sure, I agree with that.
We have to be more critical thinkers, in my opinion.
Danny, are you okay if I bring up an experience I had with a Republican this week on Facebook?
Absolutely, yeah.
So the Republicans passed the budget in the House, and Thomas Massie, who is one of my favorite congressmen, said, "I voted no because it's going to raise the deficit. They've raised the debt ceiling to $40 trillion. It's going to be $395 billion this year, $295 billion the next year, and $200 and something billion the year after that." And then he said, "Obviously, I'm a no vote." Now that bill had no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, and no tax on overtime.
Okay.
Republicans were calling Thomas Massie a RINO. I don't understand. Yeah. They would call him a RINO, but they called him a RINO only because he defiled the bill that had some of Trump's promises in it, regardless of the fact that DOGE was created to cut government spending. So they're like talking out of both sides of their mouth. They're like, yeah, DOGE is great, but then also, yeah, let's raise the debt limit to 40 trillion and increase the deficit by, I think they said 10 trillion over the next 10 years. So it's like, even in the Republican Party, you know, you have this like I was getting kind of like railroaded by what I would say is a low IQ voter, or like someone who votes just because it's their party, not because of policy. You know, they're just red team good, blue team bad. And I'm like, I'm trying to bring in nuance to like what she posted about calling Thomas Massie a RINO. And I'm like, no, you don't understand. Like, he's more America first than the other 217 Republicans. You don't understand. Like, we voted for that guy. We voted for that outlook on federal government spending, not the other 217. But they want to, like, certain Republicans are like, either you're going to agree with what the mass Republicans say or you're not. And if you're not, then we don't like you. And I feel like that's a problem just in the party in itself.
And I think you never know what the trigger topics are going to be, right? So, like, you know, I had a conservative friend today decided that the trigger topic was transgender women in sports.
Okay.
Which is the trigger topic. I understand that. But, like, to say you're going to dismiss every Democrat because some of them voted for that.
Almost all of them did, actually. Wait, did all of them? Yeah, all of them did.
They all did.
Oh, did they all? Okay.
All 47 of them did, yeah.
Which surprises me, because I didn't think that was like that's not a stand your ground type of topic for them. But okay.
Yeah, it was but what was the number? 47 to 53, right?
I don't remember.
So you either dismiss the whole party and all of their politics based on one issue. And I've seen this before. Like, you get a one issue person, like you get a one issue conservative that if there's a abortion on the table, right? Because that's a hot button.
Yeah.
Trigger issue. Like, if you vote on one issue, are you really seeing the whole picture? Like, and I get it. That's got religious convictions. It's got, and both of them do, I guess. And like I said, I'm not going to get into where I fall on either of these. I have strong convictions on both. And it may surprise you that they are diverging. But like, why pick one issue? Like, can you just understand the whole political landscape and then have conversations instead of just putting your foot in the ground and sticking to it on one issue?
Well, and I mean, so to be fair, I mean, there's different positions where there's different offices that carry different weight for different issues. So, like, I used to only vote probably right up to 2016. In terms of the presidential race, I only really cared about foreign policy and war, and that obviously changed after that and COVID, which I want to talk about in a little bit. But my point
I don't make a laugh at COVID.
Yeah, no, that's a big can of worms, because it's actually relevant to what we're talking about here. So my point is, yeah, I mean, like, one of our friends ran for state rep, and just because, you know, he didn't take the hardest line traditional Republican stance on abortion, because it wasn't even on the ballot. You know, there were some voters out there who were opposed to him. Would that be fair to say, Josh? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. I mean,
but I don't think
the best thing about abortion is that every state can now democratically vote by their population what they want to do in their state. And I think I've said this before. Abortion, if you're anti-abortion, the best thing you can do right now is change the culture And like the great Ron Paul said, don't make it illegal, make it unthinkable. Meaning, before you even get to that point, there should be charities. There should be charitable resources given to people so they feel like they could have a baby if they needed to, rather than going to, every abortion is a tragedy, is what Bill Clinton said, and he was a Democrat. So like,
I think you have to set up the support services, and whether that's done through churches and charities, fine, but there have to be those services in place before you just outright ban it anywhere.
Right. But at least it's voted on democratically by the state, and it's not like an overarching federal government thing. Like federal government's huge. I mean, like they really should have
and disassociated from
yes.
the vast majority of the the constituency. Like I lived in Arizona for a while. I know, and I grew up in DC, so I understand the disparity of what people in DC think versus what people that live in the deserts of Arizona think. Like, it's a different way of thinking. So yes, states need to be able to determine things for themselves, but also I think before either the federal government or the states can decide, like, you can't put individuals at risk based on whether the majority of the people vote one way either. I think there has to be support services. But that's just a personal opinion. And I don't think that has to be done by the government, either the state or the federal government. I think that you just need to, if you are a state government or a federal government, make sure that there is something in place for the people who would fall through the cracks on things like that.
Yeah, but even cracks are cracks. Something's always gonna fall through. There is no like there is no like perfect solution to that issue.
Right, I get that, but
there'll never be a perfect thing to that issue. And being a Christian, with me, I am fully pro-life, but I don't think we should legislate it anymore. It's not like, for one, it's not a winning topic. You'll get. I mean, if you're in a purple area, you're Republican, you're pro-life, you're gonna get crushed. It's just not gonna happen. It's not gonna work. So for one, it's not even a legitimate thing to run on anymore. And also, like, we really should try to change the culture and treat people with love and dignity and understanding, instead of just calling them a murderer. And I mean, I don't think there's really ever a reason for an abortion, because I believe the way I believe, that the Bible says, from the womb I knew you. So from your mother's womb I knew you, and I created you, is what the Bible says. So I don't think it's anyone has any right to remove a human life. But we can't legislate that, because and my goal as a libertarian, as a Christian, as a father, I want to make it unthinkable, not illegal. That's just that's just the way to go.
But that's a cultural approach.
Yes,
rather than
yes,
a political approach. So,
absolutely.
Yeah. No, I definitely see that point of view. I think, the other aspect of that is not everybody is a Christian.
Mhm.
Not everybody has that viewpoint. And where do their, like, and you said, like, the states get to vote on it, but sometimes votes don't reflect your own views, right? So where is my autonomy in that? As a libertarian, I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the funny thing is that liberals will be libertarian when they start losing rights that they think they had, and then Republicans become libertarian when it comes to taxation and taking their money away. So I mean, it's potato, in my opinion. I mean, like when you say autonomy, if you're a woman, you're pregnant, and you think your right to ease and convenience is greater than a child's right to live, then I mean, I don't. You don't need God to say who's on the right side and who's on the wrong side. The vast majority of abortions are abortions of ease and convenience, not abortions for incest and rape.
Well, yeah, one of the functions of the state is to protect. I mean, we have laws again protecting people from, obviously murder and other kinds of violence. The non-aggression principle of libertarianism. But I guess it's a question of at what point is an unborn child protected by the state, and I think that's where a lot of the debate goes. I mean, technology is always advancing, like where the preemies are born much earlier now and able to survive. So if I mean, I don't know what the exact number of weeks is, but if they're
23.
protected, yeah. So if they're protected at 23, but let's say 30 years ago, no child could survive at 23. Well, does that mean they shouldn't have been protected under a pro-life law just because I just don't understand that rule, because what if we advance science where that you could have a baby come out at 10 weeks and still live? Like, so do we reduce the abortion limit to 10 weeks? Like, I think to me it's kind of arbitrary, which is why
That's why it's a cultural thing. That's why the culture should do it.
Yeah, right.
Let it legal, but like make charitable, have charities, have churches, have birthing centers, and let people, change the culture for the better.
Yeah, that's good.
So I think so. Historically and culturally, there's been a lot of shame around, unmarried pregnancies in the Christian religion. But so that shame plays into, I think, a lot of times women wanting to avoid even having anybody know about it. So I think, like, it's obviously, guys, like very complex issue, and like three dudes talking about it on a podcast may not be
Sure.
like the best, like, but a complex issue that I think deserves a lot of discussion. Like I said, like let's all discuss this, and what you said about not legislating it, I think there's a lot of merit to that, Josh. Like, is he gone? He
looks
disappeared.
like we lost him. Yeah, we've got first you now, Josh, dropping off. I guess you guys need to take your little bathroom breaks. That's what's really going on here, right?
maybe I'll take mine now while he's gone.
Yeah, but there he is. Yeah.
Sorry, I lost
You have
my
a good bathroom
hotspot.
break.
No, I had my hotspot. Believe me, I like talking about this topic. So it's like, I'm like, of course.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Well, we were just talking about how maybe we'll wrap it up and move on to the next topic. But did you have anything else?
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should. No. I'm just an advocate of cultural change. Yeah, I mean, that's about.
Yeah, and I was so my last point was, well, two last points was one, I think it merits discussion, and then my other point, like can we all come together and discuss this, not as a nation or maybe just as a state or a community, and like figure it out together. But then again, and my final point was like maybe three dudes aren't the to be discussing.
I reject that. I actually reject that. Oh, okay. Yes.
Let me hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, really, really, really quick. It's my kid too.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a little crude, but like when you used to put 50 cents in a vending machine for a soda, and you got the soda out, was it your soda? Yeah, because you paid for it. You put the coins into the machine. Now, that's a little bit of a crude analogy, but it's still.
How's your wife feel about that? No, just kidding.
She actually agrees with me. She's like, well, yeah, it's called your seed for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
It's your seed. There's a reason why, your children bear your last name in a traditional stance, and I hope it stays that way. But like, it's my kid too. Just because where the baby dwells, that doesn't mean I lose my right as father.
But
And
it does mean that you have a little, I believe anyway, you have a little less to say about whether that baby gets carried to term. Not in the sense that you were saying about if it's a case of this is not easy for me, so I'm going to reject it. But in the case of like, I could die, or, those like, this could end my
again,
life.
that's less than 1%. That's less than 1%. That's a fraction of a percentage. And also, I'm not a monster. Like if it's gonna kill my wife, I'd be like, you
Yeah.
choose.
Save her
But
life.
also, let me just say this: like we've given mothers the ability to opt out of motherhood, and the man has no say. But interestingly enough, if a woman decides to keep a baby out of wedlock, the man has no say, and the man will be financially tied to that responsibility for the rest of his life. So, on a principled point, why does a woman get to relieve herself from that burden, but a man does not get to walk away from his child and will have to pay child support and maybe go to jail time if he doesn't pay child support? So, it's not principled. It's not even close to principled.
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, it bears a large discussion, but as soon as you say that, the other side typically decides to walk away, or they don't want to talk, or they're saying you're misogynistic, or
Yeah.
the conversation ends as soon as I would bring that point up.
It's a tough topic. I've been shamed before for being a man and having an opinion on abortion. And okay, I guess I can't talk about it. It doesn't seem fair, which is part of the problem. Like, how are we supposed to have dialogue if you can't have dialogue because you're a man, so you're not
Well,
supposed to have an opinion?
and that's, guys, that's where it comes down to, like, when we have these conversations, there have to be like expectations of not doing that to people, like not shaming somebody for having an opinion, and setting parameters around public discussion and decorum. And we've lost that as a society in some ways here in the United States. We used to be able to have discussions like this without biting each other's heads off. Like,
Mhm.
where has that gone? What, like, if we take the Make America Great Again situation, like, that was something that was great about America. Can we have a discussion without thinking the other person that disagrees with me is the absolute enemy? Why can't we do that?
Amen.
Well, I think we're doing it right now.
I hope so. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, us three, we're doing it right now, and me and Danny have had this before with Timor. You know,
Oh
I
yeah,
mean, that
Timor.
was,
Yeah.
like he was, a kind of a statist, pro statist person. I'm pro like libertarian, like get the state out of everything, and we went back and forth for like 3 hours. It
That
was
was a really
amazing.
fun conversation.
It
Yeah.
was very fun. It was very fun. Um, but I, I don't know if division is ever gonna leave this nation. And I think it's almost because we're 50 little nations in one big landmass.
Yeah.
Federalism is a blessing and a curse. And you say the melting pot and the American culture. There's 50 different cultures in America. Well, like you were talking about, like Richmond and like the difference between Richmond and say Central PA. I was born and raised in Missouri in a poor town, and then I went to the big city of Lancaster County, and I about like passed out. Like it was just too much. It was overstimulating. I mean, it was just completely different culture. I All these people were speaking Spanish,
Yeah.
and I was like, they're saying so fast. What are they even saying? It's just it was such a cultural shock, and I think that leads to like a permanent division and people being proud of where they're from. Um, like Robert E. Lee was proud to be a Virginian. You know, I think didn't he say in some of his memoirs that like almost that like he graduated from West Point, and he was an American, but he was a Virginian first.
He was a Virginian first. That's why he decided to lead. I don't think
Yeah.
he, on principle, believed a lot of what the South was fighting for.
Right, but he was a
But he
Virginian.
was Virginian first, and Virginia seceded from the Union, and he was going to fight for Virginia. And
Right.
and that's where we came from, right? Like, so you look at the 13 colonies. The 13 colonies were 13 separate and individual nations, like you said.
Beautiful, such a beautiful format. Oh,
And so and that's how we've developed. And I think even regionally, you can look at Virginia and see different nations. We still have eight original indigenous nation tribes and reservations here in Virginia. One of the longest, well, actually the longest peace agreements between the English and the indigenous set up. We have 8 federally recognized nations of indigenous tribes. I mean, that's just 8 different nations of people who were here before us. And then, I mean, you go to Surrey County, Virginia, you go to Norfolk, you go to Northern Virginia, you go to Richmond. Heck, you go from Richmond to Chester, which is like the city just south of Richmond, and you're getting a different version of South. We're different people from different places, but again, I can go to California and still relate, and I can go to England and still relate with people. Like, ultimately, we all need to learn how to get along a little better.
absolutely.
Yeah.
We're doing a bad job at that right now, and that was kind of my point with that Facebook post, and that was kind of my point with things in general. And I was trying to mediate it, and it still got. Dan can tell you in the comments. I think we got like about 100 comments.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I did have a lot of my conservative friends weighing in, a lot of my liberal friends weighing in, and I was trying to do my best to mediate and encourage conversation. And some people just don't want to do that anymore. They just don't want to have conversations anymore. But that's all.
Yeah.
If I invite them over to my house, we're good.
Oh yeah,
Figure out
absolutely.
a way to get along.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
That's the disappointing factor to me.
right. No, this is great. We've gone over an hour, probably an hour and 20 minutes. Do we want to end there, or I mean, if I bring up the topic of COVID, we might talk another half hour.
Well, I wanted to ask him about the Department of Education.
Sure.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Look, I know I don't know how much you can and can't say. I don't know if you're in the union or you're not in the union because you're private school.
We're
But
right to work state here in Virginia, so I couldn't join a union even if I was public school, but I'm also a private school guy, so there wouldn't be a union.
okay. All right. So there are currently 51 Department of Educations in the country, 50 state level and 1 federal level. My question is, I like federalism. I think federalism is a good thing. Why, like, are you in favor of the federal Department of Education going away, considering the federal government can use it as a hammer to tell a state to do something in their schools that they may not want to do?
I think I would be in favor of looking at it from a reform point of view, and because there's so much congressionally approved money that goes to schools in need. I don't think that I would be in favor of just eliminating the federal level without careful consideration as to what happens with supporting schools in areas that, I mean, frankly, their states just aren't doing the job.
Sure, but did you hear Trump last week? He had like a dinner with a bunch of governors, and he pointed out that like Maine's governor wasn't going to follow through with the new Title IX, basically erasing Biden's Title IX and putting it back to the old Trump Title IX. And then he said, well, you're not going to get a dime of funding then. And then Maine's governor said, "We'll see you in court." And I'm just like, what a waste! The federal government couldn't even impact um education in every state. Trump, which either good or bad, don't care. He couldn't use that as a weapon. I just don't like the idea of a president saying, "Well, we're gonna withhold funding because you don't do it the way me, the president, says." I don't like that. And I voted for him, by the way. I voted for Trump. I didn't like that.
Yeah, well, constitutionally, as a constitutional scholar and somebody that's looked at that, like he's not actually allowed to do that. And I would hope that the Supreme Court or whatever federal courts would uphold that. I don't know that they will. I don't.
Wait. But he's the executive of the executive branch. He can do whatever he wants.
That's congressionally approved funding to the schools. Like that, he doesn't control the purse. The economics are controlled by Congress.
Okay, but the precedent has been set that presidents can control the purse too.
The precedent has been set. It's not actually constitutionally backed.
Okay, but we've done how many foreign wars with the president just being like, okay, I'm going to use these troops, and apparently it's free because I'm not using Congress? That's ridiculous.
I understand that, and all of that's constitutionally unbacked. I don't support any of that. From a constitutional standpoint, there have been egregious appropriations, or the presidential authority has been stretched so much in the last, I would say, 50 years.
Well, so has the bureaucracy too, though. Like the ATF should have no. The ATF is making laws without Congress.
Yes,
It's ridiculous.
All of it's out of control.
Okay, we're good. All right, I love you. We can end now. I didn't know where he was going with it. I was like, okay, all right.
The president, like, I don't know why. I don't know where it got started. I have to look at it. But I think maybe Clinton started signing executive orders out of control. Maybe he was the one that started. I don't know if Bush before him.
Well, Congress got lazy. Congress was like, oh, I mean, if we just make all these agencies and then they're responsible of making these regulations and they're not laws, they're regulations, then I'm off the hook. I like if a constituent comes to me and says, "Hey, this regulation is really like hurting me," the elected official can just be like, "Oh, well, I mean, we approved that funding, but I didn't know anything about the regulation that can be enforced by the point of a gun." Yeah, I didn't vote for that.
I think Congress also said, like, they're going to blame the president anyway. I won't have to take the heat because I'm sheltered by 452 other congressmen and 49 other senators. I'll keep my job. They'll blame the president, and that's kind of I think where we got to with this. And then presidents came in and started signing these executive orders, and like an executive order should be something you just pee on and throw it in the trash. Honestly, like, they mean nothing. They should mean nothing, but apparently they mean everything these days, because now, to your point, Congress is just lazy and won't actually assert their authority the way that they can.
So is DOGE the only way DOGE will work is if Congress then agrees to end those executive departments? Is that the only way to get rid of the Department of Education and say the IRS and the Federal Reserve and stuff like that?
DOGE has to be, in my opinion, from a constitutional perspective, DOGE has to be authorized by Congress, and it's not at this point.
Okay.
So if Congress steps in and authorizes DOGE, then they can do what Congress authorizes them to do, which should be in a mandate of a congressional act or law. But right now, they're acting out of the rule of law. They're acting under an executive order that
Well,
has no congressional authority.
if I may, though, the president, the president is using DOGE as a basically a private recommendation office, where Elon and his team recommends Trump, says this is waste, fraud, abuse, and because you're the executive of the executive branch and you oversee these departments, you're their boss. Therefore, you can fire them and you can shut down their doors.
He would still need congressional approval.
So he's not the executive of the executive branch.
No, he's the executive of the executive branch. He would still need executive approval to eliminate funds appropriated to those organizations for those purposes.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But can he then? I'm not fighting or anything. I just want to understand. I like the Constitution
I'm not
too.
fighting either.
I'm trying to understand because, like, when Vivek Ramaswamy ran for president as a Republican, I donated money to him. I was going to volunteer and knock doors for Vivek. I love Vivek. And the way he was describing the executive branch and how these departments are in the executive branch, that he's then the boss. So technically, Trump could basically be like, once your funding and your allocated money is dried up, then he could close the doors then, right?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just do that then.
It's interesting.
Just call Trump up already and do it. Just
right. you would have to let the funding dry up because, again, like, Trump can recommend a budget, but the Congress controls the money. The purse, right? They call it the purse.
The House and specifically.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So those committees that oversee those offices of the government that they approved to be in commission of the federal government and to act on the behalf of the American people, in my understanding, like, I'm a history teacher, but I'm no constitutional authority. But in my understanding, yes, the funds would have to dry up before you could eliminate that, or you would have to put something through Congress to then eliminate it. So these executive orders are essentially meaningless unless, and like, I think Trump is using them in the hopes or the idea that he has the backing of Congress and the Senate, and he has a majority in the judicial to not question his authority to issue these orders. And maybe that happens.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. I guess people wouldn't be as much up in arms if he was doing it over a gradual timeline like that. Like, here's your 6 months notice or whatever, then we're going to chop it. I think the speed of which everything is happening is the real problem.
Yeah, he's issuing these orders like they're mandates of law, but they have to actually go through a legal process to be mandates of law. So if he was saying, hey, Senator such and such from this county or this state, make this a law on my behalf and put it through, then he'd have to wait for it to actually go through Congress. And then by that time, it could be 2 years later and he doesn't have the majority anymore and he loses it. So he's kind of doing this bum rush. I think Steve Bannon said something about just overload, just rush everything through, and it'll be so much that they'll miss some things. And maybe that's the case. I don't know.
Well, isn't there a loophole? There was a law passed by Congress that the president could shut down any agency that already had a redundant agency.
That's a good question.
So I can't remember what the law was passed by Congress, what it was called, but it was basically like an example that Vivek said when he was running for president was, you have the FBI and you also have the U.S. Marshals. It's a redundant agency. You don't need two federal police forces. you can cut one of them. And because the U.S. Marshals haven't been politically weaponized, you would keep the U.S. Marshals and cut the FBI.
Yeah, I would guess you'd need a constitutional lawyer to say something on that. Like, it sounds right to me. Like, I would imagine you wouldn't want redundancies, and that
Well,
and the executive is there to enforce the law, and it shouldn't have to enforce two of the same laws, right? So maybe the executive has the authority to do that. I actually don't know.
Okay. Sorry for bum rushing you on the constitutional stuff.
That's all right. No, I like it, man.
I
I
believe
enjoy
you
this
called
stuff.
yourself. You called yourself the scholar, though. I was like, oh, okay, so he's well
Well,
versed. Okay.
I do know the Constitution. I don't know all of the laws that would
You
affect.
can. There's too
Yeah,
many.
Right.
that uh, books like that, right?
Yeah.
And there are like 7 of them in a row. And
In your school, do your kids have to pass a constitution test to graduate high school?
not no. In
Really?
fact, I would
Man.
venture to guess that most Americans can't even pass the civics test that we give our immigrants.
You see, that's interesting because my high school, my middle school and high school, we only had a graduating class of 37 kids. So like in 7th grade, you could not advance from 7th grade to 8th grade unless you passed a constitution test.
Oh, we didn't have
Now,
that in Fairfax County for sure.
yeah. Now
I don't
I don't
disagree
know.
with that principle.
Yeah, I would have
Well,
loved to.
I don't know if it was a federal. I don't know. I don't know if it was a state law or it was like a locality.
I will say
Rule.
this. As an 8th grade U.S. history teacher, I make sure that my boys understand the Constitution. So, and I'm at an all boys school, so that's why I say my boys, not just
Mhm.
the students. But I try to do a good job of like teaching them the Constitution. But it's 8th grade. By the time they get to be seniors, they're not going to know all of that. So, at our school, there is an AP government course, but it's optional. It's not required. And I would change that if I was running the school. That's the one thing I'm going to say that could get me in trouble on this podcast.
I
We
don't
can
think
edit
we
it
have
out.
enough of
That's
outreach.
an opinion I don't think has political leanings at all. Like
Right.
I think we owe it to our students in the whole nation that we teach them civics and we teach them civic responsibility and we teach them character and judgment and all of those things. I think should be part of the school system. I staunchly believe that, and I think growing up in Northern Virginia as the child of a government worker, like that was priority number one, is that I understood my civic responsibilities and who I was and my relationship to my nation. And not, my mom never tried to program me into one way of thinking. My dad never tried to program me into one way of thinking. They had their beliefs and they wanted to encourage me to have my own beliefs. And that's the way I approach parenting. That's the way I approach teaching. I want to teach kids not what to think or how to think, but to think. And to
Yeah,
be
and that's why we're homeschooling. I've already brought this up numerous times with Danny. Like I don't agree that the public school system teaches kids how to think. I think the computer's making noises.
I would agree.
I
Yeah.
feel like it's telling kids what to think, how to think, when to go to the bathroom. Like it's just I've already said this with Danny before. Like my biggest goal as a father is for all my kids to be entrepreneurs. I want them all to work for themselves, work for their families, build generational wealth, and never work for someone else ever.
a lofty goal.
Yeah.
I encourage you to make sure that happens.
I'm trying. Hey, I'm trying. I'm trying to like do it the right way.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, no, this is great. We're coming up. It's after 10 o'clock.
Yep.
I think that was maybe a good wrap up. We can continue talking offline, but for in terms of the episode, I think we're good. A lot of material there. I'm sure people who are listening or watching are going to get a lot out of it. So yeah, thanks, John, for being on the show. And
Thank you.
love
My
having
pleasure.
your perspective. A great conversation.
Yeah, if you ever want to have me back, I'm game. This was
Awesome.
fun.
Maybe
Will
we
do.
can talk about national divorce next time.
All right, that'll be that'll be all rays of sunshine there. All
Only if
right.
you want it.
All right. Yeah. Thanks everybody for listening. We'll talk to you real soon. Take care. Thanks. Bye.